Streaming now, this is the Wood TV Live Desk.
And good morning, everyone. Phil Penarski here with the Wood TV Live Desk. Hope you're all having a great start to your day. For this week's Sunday story, digital reporter Matt Jaworowski took us back to 1973 when a simple shipping error left a small town in the middle of the state of Michigan absolutely decimated. He joins us now to talk a little bit more about that story, explain it, and it all revolves around PBP. Matt, thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, Phil. Good to talk to you.
Yep, no, glad to have you back on the live desk. Let's go ahead and just discuss the events that really led up to 500 farms in St. Louis, Michigan having to be quarantined and nearly 2 million livestock having to be killed. What sort of led up to this event, and really just kind of talking about the overview of this first story?
Yeah, so really it's a statewide environmental and economic disaster. In the spring of 1973, the Michigan Farm Bureau ordered magnesium oxide, which is something that is a supplement for cattle feed. It's still used today. They purchased magnesium oxide from Michigan Chemical, which was a chemical manufacturing plant in St. Louis, Michigan. However, instead of shipping magnesium oxide, the company erroneously shipped PBB, which is basically a main chemical compound of fire retardant, extremely toxic. The the PBB and magnesium oxide in certain conditions can look almost identical, to the point where the people at the Farm Bureau mixing facility in Battle Creek that received the wrong components didn't know there was a difference. So this flame retardant material was mixed into this cattle feed, ended up poisoning not just the cattle that received the tainted feed, but animals that received feed in the months and months after, because the mixing machinery that was used to mix those chemicals, everything after that was tainted until it was given a full deep clean. So really we ended up with more than 1 million animals total that had to be slaughtered because they had these high chemical levels in their body. And that doesn't even factor in all the animals that were sold to market. So really, state agencies estimate that pretty much everyone in the state of Michigan at that time, between eating meat or dairy products, ingested PBB and had that stored in their body.
Mm-hmm. And you touched on just sort of some of the elements that went along with this story. Obviously, the farms being impacted, the livestock being impacted.
Mm-hmm.
Why exactly was this so damaging, and why wasn't it caught? How did this error even really happen?
Right, it's a very complex story. The error really comes down to like a series of simple mistakes. We learned afterward that the truck driver who packed the trucks, it was illiterate. He can't read, or he couldn't read at the time. There was also a paper shortage at approximately that time. So usually the magnesium oxide, which went by the brand name Nutrimaster, they come in color-coded bags. The PBB, the fire retardant, was known as Firemaster. So usually these bags had different colors, but because of a paper shortage, those pre-made bags weren't there, so the chemical company had to make them themselves. So they're plain brown bags instead of anything color coordinated with a name spray painted on. So it appears that this truck driver just simply grabbed the wrong product. He was looking for Nutrimaster, grabbed Firemaster instead. And like I said, talking about how magnesium oxide and the PBB look similar, in a warehouse, these bags sit there for a long time, and when magnesium oxide gets wet, it forms into this grayish white kind of clumpy material. That's exactly what the Firemaster looks like. So it's a lot of just simple things. Oh, he misread the label. It was shipped the wrong way. It just happened to be this material that's not only highly toxic, but looks just like the material that the people at the Farm Bureau mixing facility are used to dealing with. So it took months and months and months, a lot of hard work and really persistent prodding by a few key farmers and his allies to try to figure out what happened here and bust this case wide open.
Right, and Matt, this is part of a 4-part series that you're going to be looking more into on this event that happened 40 years ago. And, just kind of talking about this, just with this first part alone, what was sort of your big takeaway from this? Obviously, you're going to be going more in depth into this story and the timeline of events, but really just from this beginning article that really explains what took place in 1973, what did you really come away feeling like, wow, this was the craziest part of the story or the most bizarre thing when researching it?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are bizarre in the story. Just some of the numbers. I mean, the fact that more than 1 million animals had to be killed just because of this mistake. But really, just the way that the state agencies were not prepared to handle something on this magnitude. That as we go through the story in the next 3 pieces in the series, we'll kind of roll out how hard it was for them to figure out what was happening, and then once they knew it was happening, to actually address the issue. And that's what you hear from farmers, members of the state agencies, the chemists and the science experts that really kind of helped crack all this, is they just weren't prepared to address a situation on this grand of a scale.
And Matt, coming up, next Sunday will be the next part in the series. Tell us a little bit about, give us a little bit of a preview on that next story, as well as the remaining parts in this series.
Yeah, so the next part 2 and part 3 we'll really we'll go into deeper detail on what happened. We'll focus on 2 specific people. Part 2 will be focused on Rick Halbert, who was a farmer out of Calhoun County, who was really the main driving force in figuring this out. We'll go through, he has a really unique history. Obviously, he was a farmer, was born and raised on a farm there, but before he became a farmer, he went and got his chemical engineering degree and worked as a chemical engineer for several years before going back and becoming a farmer. So he had a really unique background and kind of knew what to look for, that kind of thing. So that'll be part 2. And that will lead us up really in the what's wrong with my animals. I think it's the feed. How do I prove it's the feed? To that part. Part 3 is, okay, now the state is aware of what's happening. And we have to help. We have to figure out what animals are toxic, how people are still eating this material, and also helping the farmers who have to sacrifice their cattle because they can no longer invest in it or sell it off. And then part 4 is where we are today. So, and that will be a really interesting story. So the chemical plant at the center of all this is in St. Louis, Michigan. It was shut down for good in 1978 and demolished, but there's so much contamination there that still today, it's still an EPA Superfund site, and work is still being done to clean up the area around that plant. So that will be part 4, and then looking into the health impacts that we see from PBB contamination, even still today, generations removed from this giant mistake.
It's going to be a very interesting series to really pay attention to over on our website, woodtv.com. Matt, thank you so much for stopping by again. You will be here next Wednesday to talk about the next part in that series. And for everybody who hasn't had the chance to check out the first part in this series, I highly encourage you to do so. If you're watching us on Facebook, you can find a link to that story right now. It is in the description box or in the comments section. You can find it anytime on woodtv.com. Matt, as always, thank you so much for coming on the live desk today.
Anytime, Phil. I'll talk to you next week.
Absolutely. And I want to thank everybody else for tuning into this latest edition of the Wood TV Live Desk. I'm Phil Penarski, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.